What's happening? This is the Motorized Pharos. It is the craziest grinder I have ever used, and I just want to talk about it. I also kind of want to talk a little bit about Orphan Espresso grinders, my experience with them, and why does something like this exist, and what is so interesting about this. There is a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. So, as you can tell here, I am Orphan Espresso's #1 fan. I have an Apex, I have a normal Pharos, and then I have the crazy final form Motorized Pharos. So I kind of want to start off by giving kind of an overview of what I think of Orphan Espresso grinders. I think Orphan Espresso grinders are the most no compromise, like let's take every single point and put it into performance. That's what the Apex is, that's what the Pharos is that let's put everything into creating the best cup possible. And I do believe that the Apex is the best hand grinder for filter coffee, and I think the Pharos is one of the best hand grinders for espresso. The problem is that there's this huge focus on performance, and I do believe that at least the Pharos was created at a different time where coffee preferences were a lot different, but grinding, for example, light roast espresso on a Pharos is terrible. It's crazy to me. Also, using the Apex is a little bit questionable at times, but at the end of the day, the coffee coming out of these grinders is absolutely insane, and it's because they're doing stuff nobody else is doing. We have big flat ghost burrs in the Apex. We have big conical burrs in this hand grinder, and you have to understand the time that the Pharos came out, the only other grinders around were, I believe, the Compact K series that used the same exact burr in here. And that was thousands of dollars many years ago, where you could buy a Pharos for a few $100. So you were getting a massive value about 10-ish years ago. So when this came out, this is like mad value. Of course, you just have to deal with the quirks of this grinder. And what we found out over the past 10-ish years is that a lot of people have taken their Pharoses to the next level. And the reason why I kind of want to talk about this now is because I got a wonderful email from Kyle. He documented his journey of using an Orphan Espresso Pharos 1.0, taking it to the next level. He modified it, he bolted it onto boards, and it's just, that's the type of stuff that is so fun to me, is that people really taken these grinders and adapted them to the modern age. We have a Pharos now, like, you know, you gotta bolt the thing to a table or something, and you can grind your light roast espresso with it, and I would say this is really the final form version of the Pharos, and I just wanted to talk about it today. But I think that is just so fun with OE grinders, is that it's just like, people are crazy, and they do crazy things to their grinders, and there's this whole entire meta with how do you make the Pharos something that isn't the Pharos, or even with the Apex, which direction should you grind the coffee? Do you want something faster that can jam, or do you want something slower but have an easier grinding experience? But I do think that OE grinders are insane performance-wise. Just usability, you gotta kind of figure that out. So let's talk about the Pharos first and how this comes to be. Basically, the Pharos was the first hand grinder to come out with 68mm conicals in a affordable package. And during the time, I believe it was the Compact K series, one of the compacts had the same exact burr size. It was a World Barista Championship grinder, and that thing was thousands of dollars all those years ago. This was just value right here. And you were getting the same exact performance, but at a much lower cost. And I would also argue that all those years ago, the coffee preferences are just perfect for this. People, I would say, are using darker roast coffees, things that are not so hard to grind with. With the Pharos at an espresso setting, you can actually grind dark roast coffee for espresso completely fine. And I think during that time, a lot of people really took advantage of the price. As we look today, we find out that a lot of people are drinking lighter roast coffees, denser coffees, harder to grind, and that's really where the Pharos kind of falls apart. I think a lot of people would comment on the Pharos just being an unusable grinder, but I think that's really just, it's a different time when this came out. So I think you have to understand that, but really that's what makes this very fascinating, because we have evolved. We're like, how do we take this and adapt it to the modern age? And this is what we get today. So there are a few different motorized projects out there when it comes to Pharos. Is how do you make this motorized? Because at the end of the day, the burr set in the Pharos is fantastic for espresso. It's your traditional 68mm conical. I would definitely say very traditional conical flavor profile, very focused on that big body. You definitely can pull your medium lights, but it really reminds me of something like the Niche, Healer Flux, any of those traditional style grinders. This is a motorized Pharos, and it is currently mounted to a wall of some sort, and inside of here there is a power drill which then goes down to here, so it retains the top part of the Pharos. The grind size mechanism has been adjusted slightly, just a different color. There are a few different mods that have been done up here. There's a sheet metal funnel, so instead of using this little plunger here to like slap the grinds out, this here just you can grind straight through, and you can see these big burrs visually in here. But it is very reminiscent of the actual Pharos. So what makes this very fascinating is that it is variable RPM, and because it uses a freaking power drill in here, you can grind all roast levels completely fine. Instead of it stalling, like you try to grind this with your hands, you have a terrible time, you can just run the power drill. The problem is that it's a power drill. So let me turn this guy on and you'll kind of see a few very interesting quirks about it, but it uses a pretty high-end DeWalt drill back here, and I'll then go ahead and take this off and you'll kind of see everything. But so now let me turn this guy on and ramp the RPM up and show you the magic. You can get this thing really, really fast. Yeah, you get RPM adjustment. So that means you get a lot of control over what you can do. Guess you don't have to spend a lot of money for a Titan grinder that has variable RPM. But yeah, that is there. And you load the beans in here and you use this little anti-popcorning cover. I'm just going to grind some coffee real quick to show you. And we'll use a pretty light roast coffee because you can do that with this grinder. All right, we're gonna take some Tim Wendelboe Gesha and we're just gonna toss this guy in here and we're gonna have a great time because this grinder does a fantastic job. But yeah, you can indeed put coffee in here, and if you're doing those lighter roast coffees at the finer grinds, then what you do is you just start with a higher RPM. Little fun shoot, and you bean loader, I would say, you go in there and you pour the coffee in like that, and then we take our anti-popcorning shield and we put that in like so, and because this is a light roast coffee, you're gonna make sure our power drill is set pretty high up there, so I got the RPMs turned up pretty high. Yeah, that's what it's like. It puts a smile on my face. This is so funny. So instead of it being kind of painful to use a Pharos and grinding some of these light roast coffees, you let the power drill do its work, and it is so funny. So as you can see there are definitely some grounds retained. That's just because the chute in here is right below the actual burr set there. Let's kind of show a workflow example. A little sheet metal funnel here that goes into your portafilter like so. You take your coffee here, you can do a RPM check real quick to see how fast you're spinning. I would say anything about there is pretty good for your medium roast. You're gonna need to go a little bit higher for your ultra lights, like I had to go a little bit higher for that Gesha there, the Wendelboe, but you load the coffee in here using this wonderful little funnel, and you push the beans in instead of using the black little adjustment thing here and go like, you now use, it's just much easier to do. You put this in here, you put your portafilter under, and we grind away. And we can up the RPM. Whoa, magic! It's like a vacuum cleaner. I don't know. It's a frickin' power drill. It's hilarious. But yeah, there's our espresso fine grind in our portafilter. Yeah, you can do this to a Pharos. But yeah, the coffee quality coming out of this thing is fantastic. It's just like a Pharos, big conical, big traditional flavor, really just nice comforting properties in cup. I've talked about it a few times before. But yeah, that's like the traditional work. Like that right there is like the workflow with this grinder. It actually is very bearable, but I think there's just so much novelty to having one of these. It actually works quite well, in my opinion. It's just really, 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 really loud. And you definitely want to make sure everyone in your house is awake, or you can wake them up using this. This is louder than the Blender 270, but yeah, it's a freaking power drill. So yeah. So now let's kind of go and talk about some other features of the Motorized Pharos. Of course, you have the wonderful RPM adjustment up here, but what else is very, very cool with this is that this is a I'm laughing recording this video, but this is also a wall-mountable grinder. So the guy who created this wanted a easier way to actually use the grinder, and he just basically built a portable wall. So we have this whole contraption here, and the actual grinder part, I'm gonna unplug it from this extension cord, is it's mounted like this here. So we have a few brackets on the back here. The power drill cord goes out from the back through this hole, and there's these screws here that you use to wall mount. So it's over here and over here. And what's really nice is this wood here is really well done. This is sheet metal up here, but this is all really well built. And yeah, this is the whole entire grinder. I mean, you know, there's a DeWalt power drill in here. And then down here, there's kind of that custom funnel, which is hilarious. Basically the craziest grinder that I've ever used. That's the grinder wall mounted back on the portable wall, but here is the backside if you wanted to see this. So there's that hole that's cut through here to actually run the power cord from the drill. The other thing to note with this grinder is that because it's adapted from a hand grinder, the actual scale to which you adjust the grind size is not always facing forward or facing the right way. So after I grind, if I want to actually adjust the grind size, I've found that I just need to run it a little just to make sure it shows up at the right side. So now I can see the scale here. And I do want to note that this is kind of dangerous. This little grind size adjustment knob is pokey. It's kind of just like it's like a little stake there, but you definitely do not want to stick your finger anywhere near this when you're running. But the actual grind size adjustment is very, very simple on this grinder. You just go left and right like every grinder basically, and it's much better than the original way of adjusting grind on the Pharos. It's really kind of the modernization of the normal Pharos, and I find it hilarious. So if you were interested in doing something crazy like this, you can check out the Home Barista thread. I'll link that in the description. Yeah, I am very speechless as to what else to say about this grinder because it is hilarious. That's the Motorized Pharos. That's all I wanted to show you guys today. It's really fun. Thank you so much for spending the time to watch the video. I'll see you guys around.